In America, everyone is running. Running to pay the bills, running to raise their kids, running just to keep up as everything, from gas and medicine to rent, rises faster than your paycheck. Sometimes you catch yourself asking, how long do I have to keep doing this? Is my whole life just for paying bills? And then you hear about starting a business. You need a huge capital. You need $1 million idea. You need a team, a plan, all the things you don't have. But here's the truth no one tells you. Thousands of Americans escape this cycle with just $100 or less. No investors, no degree, no luck falling from the sky. All they have are two things: a small skill and a bigger fear. The fear of living their entire life without freedom. You know that feeling, right? Waking up every morning and asking yourself, am I really living or just spinning in place? The $100 startup exists to tell you one very important thing. You don't need a huge opportunity to escape the rat race. It starts with one small step in the right direction. And that small step might be hidden in a skill you're overlooking every single day. Part 1. Freedom is the destination. Money is just the means. Chris Guillebeau wrote The $100 Startup on a perfectly ordinary morning in Portland. Sitting in his favorite cafe, he watched people lining up at the bus stop. Office workers clutching Starbucks cups, a UPS driver finishing his night shift, a few young people with headphones trying to hide the exhaustion on their faces. They weren't destitute, they had jobs, steady incomes, but Chris noticed a truth America rarely states out loud. They lacked freedom. He once wrote, "People don't truly desire wealth. They desire a life they actively choose." The problem is, society teaches the opposite. People grow up believing that to be free, you need a lot of money. To earn money, you must spend your life working for someone else. In the process, they trade away their youth just to buy back a few moments of autonomy when they retire. But that's not the whole truth. In his travels through hundreds of countries, Chris met countless people with just a few $100s in their pockets, yet they lived freer lives than Americans making $80,000 a year. They weren't rich, but they had the power to structure each day as they wished. Chris realized that freedom is the true goal. Money is merely the tool. One story he shares is about Brett, an office worker in Austin, frustrated with the 9-to-5 grind. He had no debt, a stable income, but every morning felt like he was living in someone else's life. One day, he spent $300 to set up a simple website selling cold brew guides, something he had been making for friends on weekends. The results were astonishing. $400 in the first week, $2,000 after a month. A year later, he quit his job. Not because he had become wealthy, but because he had bought back what the system had long taken from him: his own time. Chris calls this the price of freedom, and the amazing thing is that price is often very low. No one asks you to become a millionaire. No one demands you build a billion-dollar company. Sometimes all it takes is $100, a small skill, and a handful of customers. Freedom isn't a reward for success. It's something you can claim the moment you stop waiting for permission. In America, stories like this happen every day, though few notice. A single mother in Florida sells handmade decor on Etsy, earning enough to stay home with her child without overtime. A Seattle teacher sells $5 lesson plans, making a few $1,000s a month. A former Marine in Phoenix runs auto repair classes from his garage, earning more than he did in the military. None of them became Jeff Bezos, but they became the freest versions of themselves. Chris concludes with a simple yet powerful truth. You don't need a lot of money to live like the rich. You just need enough to live the way you choose. Once you understand that, you see that freedom isn't something you reach after getting rich. Freedom is the reason to start today. Part 2. Ideas don't need to be unique. They just need to solve a problem. Chris Guillebeau once said, "People don't pay for your creativity. They pay for their problems being solved." That's why he always smiles softly whenever someone says, "I want to start a business, but I haven't thought of a unique idea yet." The truth is, unique ideas almost never make money. Meanwhile, ordinary ideas, so simple they might sound boring, can support a family for years. Chris realized this when he met Gary, a middle-aged man in Denver who had been through 2 layoffs and a divorce. Gary didn't have a big dream. He didn't want to build a billion-dollar app. He didn't aim to change the world. He just had a small problem. His neighbors, mostly elderly, often complained about not being able to read the fine print on insurance contracts, instruction manuals, emails, or bank documents. Patient by nature, Gary helped them read, explain, and organize their papers. One day, an elderly lady handed him $20 and said, "You should charge for this. You do it better than the bank employees." And so Gary created one of the quirkiest businesses Chris had ever seen, a document reading and explaining service for seniors, $25 per session. No tech, no startup model, no groundbreaking creativity. Simply solving a clear problem for a specific group of people. The funny thing? Gary makes over $3,000 a month doing something most people would consider too mundane to be a business idea. But that's the spirit of the $100 startup. You don't need to invent something the world has never seen. You just need to do well what others do poorly. Chris notes that most of the successful projects he studied share a common trait. Their ideas weren't new, but they noticed a need that others overlooked. A person in Miami offers dog walking for office workers, earning $90,000 a year. A guy in Minnesota sells Excel templates that automate personal finance calculations, earning more than he did as an engineer. A mom in Ohio compiles cheap, easy, fast recipes and sells a $7 ebook downloaded tens of thousands of times. None of them were unique. None of them invented anything new. But they all answered a question that wealthy people answer better than the poor. What problems are other people facing? When you solve the right problem, the market finds you. No big idea needed, no business genius required, no complex technology necessary. Just see someone else's pain and give them something they're willing to pay to make it go away. That is the essence of a truly valuable idea. Part 3. Money follows value, not ideas. Chris Guillebeau has a perspective that surprises many people. Money doesn't chase ideas. Money follows value. An idea, no matter how brilliant, is worthless if it doesn't produce tangible results for someone. Chris realized this not in a flashy business seminar, but in a small cafe in Portland while talking with a woman named Olivia, who accidentally created a $40,000 a year business without ever having a business idea. Olivia simply wanted to help a few friends organize their workspaces, sort their documents, and optimize their living spaces. She prepared boxes, categorized items, tidied up, all according to her favorite method of neatness. One of her friends offered to pay her, then another, and then many more. Soon enough, she launched a professional organizing service, something she had never imagined would become a career. The interesting part, Olivia didn't invent anything. Tidying up is something anyone can do, but she did it better, faster, and more systematically. Chris calls this value practicality, real, tangible value that improves someone's life immediately. And it's always more powerful than any idea on paper. In the $100 startup, Chris notes that 90% of the people he interviewed didn't start with a business plan.
They started with a skill or service that someone actually needed. The market doesn't care how creative you are. The market only asks, how much are you making my life better? Like the American guy who fixes old AC motors. In a hot city like Phoenix, his service suddenly becomes priceless, even though there's nothing new about it. Or the woman in Seattle who takes professional photos of pets for families. A small service, but one that clearly brings joy and people are willing to pay for. Chris says, if you want to make money, don't start by asking, is my idea good? Start by asking, what value am I creating for whom? Money doesn't come from creativity. Money comes from value proven through action. It's not about inventing something new. It's about making someone's life better because of what you do. That is the real key to unlocking freedom, something ideas alone can never achieve.
Part 4. Launch fast, sell early, perfect later. Chris Guillebeau has a classic principle that anyone who's read The $100 Startup never forgets. Launch now, improve later. Start now, perfect later. It sounds simple, but this is exactly why many talented Americans with skills, know-how, and secrets never actually start their own small business. They spend months preparing logos, websites, packaging, slogans, while someone else takes a single afternoon to create a landing page, set a price, and see who actually wants to buy. Chris says, the market is the only place that gives you answers, not a boardroom, not a business plan. He tells the story of a man named Michael in Denver. Michael wanted to start a food photography service. He spent 6 months learning color correction, buying lenses, building a website, yet still didn't launch because it wasn't perfect. Meanwhile, his friend Sarah did the opposite. She photographed a few dishes at home, posted them on social media, and captioned, "Menu photography for restaurants starting at $100. Inbox me if interested." In the first week, she got 3 clients. By the end of the month, she had 6 more. And Michael, still tweaking his portfolio. Chris emphasizes a very practical point. Money only comes to those who put their work out there. No one pays for what you're preparing. No one buys perfection that doesn't exist yet. Maybe you don't know how to shoot a perfect video, but you know enough to sell a basic editing service to small shops. Maybe your course isn't complete, but you can run a beta class for the first 10 students. Maybe your product isn't finished, but you can take pre-orders, collect deposits, and validate real demand. In America, countless million-dollar businesses started with rough prototypes like this. A mom in Texas sold a handwriting teaching kit. The first version was just a 7-page PDF sent by email. A guy in Chicago sold homemade baked goods with no store, taking orders only through Instagram. They didn't wait for everything to be perfect. They launched version 0.1, and customer feedback guided their improvements. Chris concludes with a memorable line. If you're not embarrassed by your first launch, you launch too late. So don't wait until you feel ready. You'll never feel ready. Put your work out there, even if it's imperfect, and let the market tell you what needs fixing. Launch fast, sell early, iterate. That's the fastest way to turn $100 into a real business. Part 5. Marketing equals telling the right story. Chris Guillebeau emphasizes in The $100 Startup that marketing isn't about flashy ads or $1 million campaigns. Marketing is about telling the right story. The story that makes someone say, this is for me. I need this. He shares the story of Lisa, a mom in Atlanta who sells handmade children's products. Lisa didn't have a huge advertising budget. She simply wrote small stories about how she made each item, memories of creating them with her kids, and how her products made children happier and safer. Those posts, shared on Facebook and Instagram, resonated with customers who clicked buy immediately because they saw themselves in her story.
Chris explains, customers don't buy products. They buy the story, experience, and emotion the product brings. An American might pay for a handmade blanket not just for its quality, but for the story of the person who made it, for the joy and peace of mind it provides. He also shares the example of a chef in Portland who launched an online cooking class. At first, he worried no one would care. But when he started telling his story, "I used to neglect family dinners, but learning these cooking skills saved our mealtimes," students began signing up. A simple, genuine message aimed at the right audience proved far more effective than any flashy advertisement. Chris summarizes the marketing philosophy of the $100 startup with one principle. You don't need a lot of money. You just need to tell the right story to the right people at the right time. This approach can turn an ordinary idea into a product people buy immediately, transforming your initial $100 into a real opportunity. In a world where everyone is selling something, the right story is what makes you stand out. It connects emotionally, builds trust, and turns the value you create into actual revenue. Part 6. Automate to make money while you sleep. Chris Guillebeau emphasizes in The $100 Startup that automation is the key to turning a small project into a sustainable income stream. You can start with just $100, but if everything depends on your direct effort, you'll quickly burn out and hit a limit. The solution? Build a system that works even when you're not there. Chris shares the story of Tom, a young man in Austin. Tom loved making handmade candles, but instead of selling only to friends and neighbors, he set up a simple online store. He used Shopify to manage orders, Zapier to automatically notify customers, and a fulfillment service to ship products without touching them. With just a few initial setup steps, Tom could make money while enjoying a weekend trip or sleeping. Chris explains that this reflects one of the core principles of successful small business: leverage technology, systems, and processes to create passive income. An American can turn hobbies like cooking, writing, or photography into sustainable earnings through automation, without hiring dozens of employees or opening a physical store. Another example is Rebecca in Seattle, who created an online course on plant care. She recorded videos, uploaded them to a learning platform, and sold automatic access. Each time a student enrolled, the money flowed directly into her account without her needing to be online or explain every detail. Chris calls this a business that never sleeps. Money keeps coming in even while you rest. The principle Chris wants to highlight: don't let money be tied to your time and effort. Automation multiplies your work, turning a small idea into a significant, stable income. When you set up the right system, you can earn money while you sleep, and that is the biggest step from your initial $100 to a real business. Part 7. Start small, but make a big impact. Chris Guillebeau emphasizes in The $100 Startup that beginnings never need to be grand. In fact, most of the successful entrepreneurs he studied started with small steps, sometimes just a few dozen or a few $100s, and a modest idea. What matters isn't the initial scale, it's the value you bring to others. Starting small allows you to learn how to interact with the market, understand what customers truly need, and adjust your pricing, product, or service in ways that a business plan on paper could never predict. It also reduces risk, enables rapid experimentation, and uncovers gaps that, if you had started big, could have cost you dearly. Chris stresses that real power lies in impact, not size. A small action taken in the right direction can ripple outward and create influence far greater than you imagine. It generates momentum, opens doors to opportunities, and gradually transforms a humble idea into a sustainable income, while simultaneously building trust and credibility in the market. This is why many entrepreneurs say they simply start with something good enough to try. Because only by acting do you gather data, learn how to improve, and see the true effect of your efforts. Chris concludes, starting small doesn't mean being insignificant. It's a way to control risk, learn, and steadily create an impact far bigger than you ever imagined. Take action today.
Because the small steps you take now are the building blocks of financial freedom, independence, and the life you truly want.